With all due respect to sticklers for realism and fans of verisimilitude, I need to call out one of the most overused tools in the Dungeon Master's kit, namely fantasy biology. A tool rather than grounding a story or campaign, I find that it just as often has the opposite effect, making the sense of disbelief harder to suspend and making scenarios feel both contrived and stupid rather than raw and real. But before I get into my reasons for thinking that fantasy biology is stupid, if you're a fan of Pathfinder 1st Edition and are looking to take your game further, consider joining the D6 Damage Discord. We have fantastic discussions about all aspects of the game, character builds, strategy guides, and much, much more. Click the link in the description of this video, join the Discord, and share your opinion. Now then, I have two big reasons for saying that fantasy biology is stupid. The first one is, it's applied where it doesn't belong. A material explanation is not better than a supernatural explanation for the existence of many fantasy creatures. Some noteworthy examples are Medusa, who's created by a curse from the gods. The yokai in Japanese mythology, the Rokurokubi, is an example of how a wicked and immoral life can turn you into a blood-drinking long-necked monstrosity. Also, in the Judeo-Christian stories that inform many of the cosmic elements in D&D, both angels and demons are spirits, with their sides in the cosmic battle between good and evil determining whether they're classified as angelic or demonic. You can see an idea very similar to this in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion, where the Valar and the Maiar, beings of pure spirit, have their form determined by their thoughts. Morgoth, the satanic figure in the Lord of the Rings universe, is a being of darkness and malice, and that is what his thoughts make of him. Another problem you run into when you apply fantasy biology where it doesn't belong is it makes scenarios less believable. A great example is, how do dragons fly? Sure, they have wings, but they're also incredibly big and heavy and have really solid bones. Do they have some kind of bladder full of airborne gas? A fly bladder? Are they just scaly blimps? Flying with magic makes just as much sense. In fact, it actually makes more sense when you consider the intelligence scores and magical abilities that dragons have. Also, just because you can explain something doesn't mean that it's not magic. Case in point, you can explain real-world magical beliefs. As an example, an egregore. This is the idea that collective will and belief can manifest a disembodied mind for the benefit of a group's goals. Possession. This is when an evil disembodied spirit inhabits a creature or object. There's also curse dolls. By creating an effigy of a person and harming it, you can harm that person. You may not believe that minds can exist without bodies, or that a supernatural connection is created between a person and an effigy of that person, but that doesn't mean that it's not an explanation. The second issue that you run into with fantasy biology is demystification. Horror and wonder both rise from mystery. The unknown can bring fear, like hearing a strange sound in the night, or wonder, opening a present on Christmas morning. But lists of facts really just bring about boredom, like listening to a lecture in school. Fantasy biology creates the notion that everything a creature can and will do is known. It's quantified. Let's say a player runs into a troll. He says something like, "That's a troll. I know all about trolls." Then the DM responds, "Okay, the troll asks you a riddle so you can cross a bridge." The player might reply with, "Trolls can't do that. They don't have the intelligence to ask riddles." In recent editions of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and D&D, there's been an attempt to integrate goblins into society. Instead of making them the murderous raiders they've been portrayed as for many editions. But this is a box they were put into by J.R.R. Tolkien for the purposes of creating Middle-earth. And you can get them out of that box in many different ways. Instead of making them more human, you could have brought them back to their fairy tale roots. You could integrate them into society by having lists of offerings to local goblins to prevent goblin mischief, left at goblin shrines. You could have anti-goblin charms and protective talismans sold at local taverns. You could make a deal with a mysterious goblin to have him spin straw into gold for you. Now that I've explained the big problems that come about by misusing fantasy biology, let's talk about times that it's been used well. First example, Monster Hunter. In Monster Hunter, the creatures that you hunt are clearly part of an ecosystem. Anjanath, Lagania, Kieran, and Rathalos are all players in that ecosystem. They all fill a role. Typically, that role is apex predator, but that's an important role for the functioning of an ecosystem. Something has to be at the top of the food chain. You're rewarded for successful hunts with items like hide and bone, and you use them in a very realistic way to craft items like armor and weapons. This is a core aspect of gameplay, and it's rooted in that fantasy biology. It also reinforces the theme of Monster Hunter, the balance of nature, and humanity's role in that. Another game which used fantasy biology really well is BioShock. The whole game is an exploration of how a fantastical, wondrous substance, namely Atom, has impacted and reshaped a society, and how that does and doesn't change human behavior. All of the supernatural abilities, like throwing fire, telekinesis, even seeing ghosts, is rooted in the fiction of this naturally occurring compound. Whether you're the dungeon master, the chief architect of this story that you're telling for your players, or you're the contributing voice of the player, telling the DM about your character, about your role in the world, I would encourage you to be thoughtful about the tools that you choose to shape this narrative that you're creating around your character, around the world. And ask yourself, does strict adherence to this principle help my story, or does it hurt it? Like anything else, if you thoughtfully apply fantasy biology, it can absolutely benefit what you're trying to do. But if you just slap it on there because you feel like you should, then it can do far more harm than good. Thank you very much for watching this video essay from D6 Damage about why fantasy biology is stupid. Now, if you're in the market for tabletop game accessories like dice, rulebooks, miniatures, and more, check out Noble Knight Games. There is an affiliate link in the description of this video. And if you're in the market for a good old-fashioned haunted house adventure, check out Sorceress, the Dietrich House, available right now on DriveThruRPG.